p.m.
Yesterday was round one of the 2018 World Chess Championships, and what a bloody great day it was. Normally, round one is a bit of a cagey affair where both sides sort of hold back because they're kind of like shadow boxing. Maybe they like the start of a boxing match. They don't want to just dive in and start hacking away at their opponent straight away. But yesterday was completely different. Both players really came out battling, but especially Magnus Carlsen, as we'll soon see. It was probably one of the most exciting first rounds of chess that I've ever seen in the World Championships. There was a funny comment on Twitter that I can't remember who actually spoke the comment, but it was along the lines of that one game yesterday was more exciting than the whole of the last World Championships where Magnus faced Sergei Karyakin. And, I'm not sure if I agree, but that was a bit of a boring World Championship match, let's be honest. So, very good sign. So I'm going to take you through my analysis of that game. I'm going to try to do a YouTube video on each round of the World Champs, giving my point of view and my knowledge as a Grandmaster. Obviously, there's a lot of great analysis out there, as all the world in chess are looking at what's happening. So the game started with Fabiano being white and playing e4 as expected. I think Fabiano will play this in every game. This is a major move. And now actually, to me, a major surprise. I thought Magnus as black will be playing e5 and trying to generally hold the game with black, playing long positional games. I'm sure this will be played by Magnus at a later time. But he came out with a surprise. c5. Maybe a similar strategy to what Magnus did last year. If you remember in round one last year against Sergei Karyakin, Magnus played the Tromposky opening with white, and that went d4, knight to f6, bishop g5, a rather surprising move. So maybe he likes early on trying to unsettle his opponent with something they're potentially not expecting. Fabiano now played knight to f3. Magnus continued with knight to c6. And here, a move that's very popular, bishop b5. Not entering into the open Sicilian with d4. I would have loved to have seen d4 played by Fabiano, because these positions after a capture on d4 are the most richest and interesting, some of the most richest and interesting opening positions you can get. And I don't know what Magnus would have played here. Would he have played potentially the Strezhnikov with e5? That would be my guess, I think, as black. This is probably theoretically considered to be one of the most soundest moves, but maybe he would have gone the classical Sicilian with d6. Who knows? Will we get a chance to see? I hope so. So bishop b5 is the Rosalimo variation, and it's a favourite of the challenger, so Magnus must have been expecting this, but he had a very clever idea in mind. He played g6, allowing the doubling of his pawns, and this is one case where you take away from the centre because you want to keep control of some central squares and allow your bishop to develop. d3, bishop g7, and now h3, not allowing the bishop to come to g4. Sometimes this wants to swap itself off because that knight defends these central squares here, and white doesn't want to allow that knight to be swapped, losing control of maybe these two squares. A sensible move. Knight f6, and now knight to c3, and here knight to d7. Now, last time these two players faced in this opening, Magnus actually played b6 here, which led to a very tense game. But knight d7 makes a lot of sense. It seems strange to move the same piece twice, you may be thinking, but you've got to place your pieces on the best squares, and where is that knight ideally placed? Why did Magnus maybe move it to this funny square? Well, the normal manoeuvre in this opening is knight to f8, knight to e6, and knight to d4. So this knight hops around to this nice central square where it is guarded by the pawn and by the bishop and by the queen. So this is a standard maneuver here. Bishop to e3, and now e5, which has been criticized by some people, but again, I don't see anything wrong with this. It's increasing control of d4, increasing control of f4, and now this knight is ready to come around. Castles. Usually white plays queen d2 here, which I would actually consider to be maybe a more flexible move, because white in some cases can even castle queenside here and continue with a similar plan as we see in the game. So maybe that's something Fabiano will use if this is played again. Castles, and now b6. Quite a rare move, but really what is black trying to do? Black is trying to free up the knight on d7 because the bishop's attacking c5. The other way to do this is by playing queen to e7, which is much more common to defend that pawn. But having a pawn there, it makes perfect sense to me. It's a very solid formation on the queen side. And now a very normal maneuver. This is very typical for white. White needs to do something. We've been talking about Magnus's plans. What is white aiming to do? Knight to h2. And white often aims to play this move f4 in the position. This is a way to open up the f-file, get some pressure there, and to remove this strong pawn on e5. And sometimes the knight can obviously come to g4. Knight to f8. Magnus continues this maneuver. f4 played. Pawn takes f4. And now rook takes f4. Okay, I don't think it makes much difference if the rook or bishop takes. This is the main move. And now, rather than going knight to e6, which is the common idea here, and this is much more commonly played, I mean, this is very thematic, following the ideas, following the central control, following putting a knight on d4, Magnus comes up with a very interesting setup, a very interesting idea. And the idea he plays is bishop to e6. And at first sight, this looks odd because, you know, what's the bishop doing there? It's just getting in the way of the knight, but there's a particular idea in mind. The rook moves back to f2, avoiding any stuff with bishop h6. And now the real idea we see, h6. Something that Magnus must have prepared at home. Funnily enough, the inside information, this is really the first novelty of the game. Not really a novelty though, because only a week ago this move was played by a Spanish woman IM in the Women's World Championships. I'm sorry, I forget the name now, but a 2300 player played this move only a week ago. And even more amazing, on Twitter, Lawrence Trent, international master, a friend of mine, actually mentioned that he had this move in his notes. I know he's good friends with Magnus. I wonder if there's any talk there between the two players. Personally, I wouldn't take any advice from Lawrence. But the idea becomes clear. Queen d2, and now a very aggressive idea, g5. And I love the way Magnus is playing this opening. He's clearly playing to win with black. What a great way to start playing in the World Championships. This restrains white's pieces, takes away the f4 square, but really it's a dark square strategy. The dark squares, these squares mainly are the squares that black is aiming to control. His pawns control these two, his bishop controls, and the knight is aiming to come and control these squares and the queen. So it's really a dark square strategy, and this is what this whole plan is about, very interestingly. Now maybe the next move, Fabiano starts to drift here. Obviously, very nervous game for both players. He plays rook on a to f1, and this is maybe a slightly artificial move. It looks normal to double rooks, but is there any real reason to do that? I mean, f7's not on pre. It's one of those moves that looks good, but it's artificial. I would have thought something more like a4 is a better way to play, because it could be quite clear that black's going to castle queenside, and you're ready to attack then. So that might be an improvement here. So rook a f1 played. I don't like that move. Queen d6, dark square strategy. And now knight g4. And again, this move is rather artificial. The knight comes into f6, but as we're going to see, Magnus castles. I love this aggressive play. Knight to f6. And I don't really believe this move. Knight to d7. It suddenly becomes clear that this whole plan of White's is just falling apart, because what's he doing? I mean, knight to h5 was played, and now bishop to e5, and Black's plan's been a complete success. Domination over the dark squares, and good chances to play something like g4, starting an attack on the queen side. And White's wasted so much time just putting his knight on the side of the board. So a great opening choice from Magnus. Now, what are you going to play as White? G4 is coming, and here Fabiano played this outrageous move g4. I mean, it's playing a poor move in front of his king, but clearly he's trying to stop the breaks. He's trying to stop f5. He's trying to stop g4. He's trying to lock things down. There's a very funny comment again I saw online about this move, and one international master remarked that this reminded him of something that his grandma said, and it was something to do with burgling, you know, the house, and it was something along the lines of, if you go down to a very busy place and you shout about, I don't want anyone to burgle my house because it's got so many goods, such expensive goods in it, I'm going to make sure it's well protected, you're inviting people to burgle it. And this move here is such a move, but it looks quite sensible to me. Now, f6 played, b3, okay, bishop to f7, and this is a great maneuver, trying to get rid of this knight so we can open up the king side. Knight to d1, and the knight is trying to reach g4 in this case. And now a very interesting decision. I mean, here, I mean, the next move is probably the biggest decision of the game. It's on the cuff of being brave or foolhardy. I mean, the acronym goes, but when you have an advantage, then you certainly, if there's a way to keep your advantage without taking risks, then you should do. You know, if there's a way to keep your advantage without risking, without sacrificing pawns, then you can do. And here I think Magnus could have just played, as he obviously planned, bishop takes h5. Well, hang on a minute, let me just go back. Sorry, instead of what he did play. So after knight d1, I think he could just play bishop takes f5, pawn takes, and now gone for a maneuver of getting this knight to one of these two squares. So something like knight to f8, and then knight to e6, and then knight into one of these two squares here. So into the center, and I'm pretty sure this is very nice for Black, this kind of idea. But one thing I've noticed about Magnus is he likes to keep, and Grishchuk mentioned this in the commentary, as he wants to keep as many advantages. He doesn't like, as top players often do, should we say, clarifying the position. He wants to keep his edges in the book, you know. And now he goes knight f8, and this allows White to take on f6 and knight to e6. So Magnus is going for a sacrifice, and I find this very intriguing. He's clearly out for blood. He's playing extremely aggressively, and up to this point bravely, in the spirit of Macau Tao, because he's, you know, you're giving up a pawn. You are risking stuff by giving up a pawn when you don't need to. Now the next move is probably a mistake. Knight d7, trying to swap off one of these bishops in a tactical manner, was a better way to play, just trying to get rid of a bishop, because in the game, okay, Fabiano gets rid of the bishop, but the way he does it, he allows some breakage of his pawn structure, and now g4 is already always a threat. Knight to f4 played, bishop takes, pawn takes, and around here Fabiano was under time pressure, and both sides played some errors. Around here Rook g2 was played, taking control of the file, but in actual fact, it was time to give back some material and play the exchange stack with rook takes f4. And I believe this has very good chances to hold. For example, bishop takes, queen takes. And even though White is an exchange down, he has two pawns and he has quite a nice pawn structure. I mean, this central structure is quite hard to break down. And I think this position it would generally be decent chances for White to hold, but very hard to work out with no time. So rook g2. Rook hg8, and the problem that White has here is the open nature of his king. There's always opportunities to take here and to swing the queen around somewhere like over here or here. The bishop at the moment is very well situated here. White's main hope is to try and get the knight into this square here. If White can get the knight here, he gets a blockade, but it's hard to do this. So again, this position very difficult. I mean, for example, if the knight comes here now, at some point, I think a very nice tactic pointed out by Robert Hess on the chess.com TV chat with Danny Wrench. I think it was something, let me get this right, along the lines of taking and now f3, opening up the king. And let's say the white king comes back to this square, g1, which is a mistake. There's a lovely little tactic with bishop c3. Queen takes, and now this is a removal tactic because now the queen slam dunks its way into g2 with checkmate. So queen to e2 was played to try and hold the f3 square. And now Magnus gets rid of one defender and plays queen to e6, preparing the rook to come here. Fabiano quickly maneuvers his knight into g4, but now queen to e8, and this was a great move. The queen comes into h5, winning the pawn back with constant pressure. Once black removes the h5 pawn, the long idea, or should I say the long-term idea that black has, is to push the black pawn to h5, forcing the knight on g4 to move, removing the blockade that white has on the king side. So queen to f3 was played, getting one piece out of the pin. Queen takes h5, and now a very good defensive move, the only defensive move. I think a lot of people here would have played king h1 because Fabiano, remember, at this moment only had minutes on his clock, but there's a nice tactical idea, not too hard to spot here. And the tactical idea here, you want to move the queen to play h5. You can actually play queen h4. h5 is an extremely hard move to stop, and if white grabs the bishop on e5, rook g3, and this is just crushing. Queen takes f4, checkmate, for example. So king to f2, the king is actually safer coming towards the center. Bishop to c7, removing any tactical ideas with this move. King to e2, and this was a mistake. Fabiano needed to find the move e5 here, trying to start some counterplay, but this is incredibly hard to find this. King to e2, and now queen g5, getting ready to play h5, and around here I just thought this would be game over for Fabiano, especially after knight to h2. A very passive move here. Now, this is where Magnus starts to go wrong. I mean, I think the next move is actually totally fine for Magnus, and it'd be a move I played, but the one thing he fails to neglect here is where his queen should be going. Can you improve on Magnus? Where in the position is that queen best placed? And this is a good tactic I tell lots of people to use. Try to get your pieces into the squares where they're going to cause the most mayhem. And here, the queen coming to b2 with the rook coming in on the g file would have simply won the game. Queen f6, queen coming to b2, and the rook can come to g3. I don't think there's any way to defend for white here. h5 I think is very understandable to control the g4 square. Rook f2, and again, now queen coming to b2. This plan all along. Queen g1, the queen goes the wrong direction. And I think this is an interesting psychological moment because I think what's happened here is Magnus has come out fighting, punching, playing great aggressive chess. But as soon as he gets this winning position, he's unable to finish. And this is something that Magnus probably wouldn't have done like 4 years ago. It shows a little bit maybe of difference in his strength there and then. He's got a much better understanding of chess now, but the finishing ideas, is he's maybe not finding as much. I mean, I think this is not such a big thing because it's the first game. Both sides are obviously very passive, but this is strange that he didn't find the win. Knight to f1, and again the queen should come into b2. h4, king to d2. King b7 and c3, and here I mean again rook g3 I think is something that Magnus would have played in the old days. This is a very nice exchange sack. The point being, after knight takes, h takes, this is actually losing rook g2 and queen a1, and the queen comes over here. But Magnus didn't want to take any risks, so I think this is showing first round nerves here. Obviously, you're giving up material here, some risks. King c2 was played, and now queen g7, and this was actually a big blunder, allowing the knight to now come back here. And on move 40, just before the time control, bishop to c3 was the major blunder. And after queen to f4, we now go into an ending where Magnus kind of has some chances, but Fabiano, to his credit, defends very well because the queens are now coming off. Let's just show the ending. I'm not going to show the whole of the ending because it's pretty damn boring. And most of the fun action has been played. They played some tactical ideas here. This e-pawn turning out to be very strong, but Magnus just getting back in time to defend. And eventually, after some tactical ideas, both sides now have we've reached a rook and pawn ending. This cannot really be taken because, well, it is taken by the knight, but this h pawn is always means that black is okay. And after some more complications, we get this ending. Now, of course, someone like me defending against Magnus will probably lose, but someone as strong as Fabiano held the draw very convincingly. The one thing to do that white should really probably aim to do is avoid these two pawns being exchanged. So if you can imagine those two pawns coming off the board, black would then have two connected passed pawns. But as long as white stops that, it's a technical draw. There's two little pawns on the board. Normally when it's a pawn advantage, all pawns on the same side of the board, it ends up being a draw. I mean, rook g6, and there's nothing Magnus does. He plays on for another couple of hours, you know, pushing, but in the end, it's a draw. Very interesting first game there. I mean, if that's a sign of things to come, I'm extremely excited about this World Championships. Now, just to show you some pictures from the World Championships, I'm now going to go over to show you a YouTube video from which ChessBase recorded, and it's actually one of my favourite actors, Woody Harrelson, was playing the first move on board one. He actually played a bit of a joke. What do you think about this joke? He knocked over the king before the match. Now, I don't know. Let's go over to the video. I'm going to show you it. I think I've got it basically up here, so I'm going to share this with you. Hopefully it will play. Let me just bear with me a second, and let's see if we can get this playing. So this is the first move, Woody Harrelson.
Magnus became the player to play with the black pieces.
So he on purpose knocks over the king. Clearly that's on purpose. I mean, that was nearly a sign of things to come, knocking over the king like that. Magnus giving a little laugh there, and then he plays the wrong move as well. The move was e4, so he's actually messing with the two players when they're in an extremely nervous situation. I mean, there's a time and place to have a joke. I don't know. I mean, okay, it's funny. It's Woody Harrelson. Get away with bloody anything. He's a hero. But that was a very entertaining start to the World Championships anyway. I mean, I'm very jealous of the commentary as well, because Woody Harrelson joined Anna Rudolph there. Oh, God, I'd love to interview Woody Harrelson. And also, very funnily, you see this top right picture. This is the Aegon logo. They're selling merchandise, T-shirts with this logo on now. I think I know where it comes from. I found a cartoon online where they stole it from. And my version of the logo is below there, and that was done by someone online. Matthew Pratt sent that to me. Thank you, Matthew. But some funny pictures there. I mean, would you wear a T-shirt with that logo on? I have to be honest. I think the logo is pretty damn cool. And I'm also now, before I finish this video, I want to talk about the broadcast, because if you want to watch the World Champs, there's many broadcasts going on. There's the official broadcast, which I actually paid £20 for, and I think it's actually, I know there's a lot of negative stuff, but I actually quite enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. And I think paying £20 to support an event like this is not the end of the world. I know there's a lot of free stuff out there, but at the end of the day, paying to get commentary from Judith Polgar and Anna Rudolph is I think, a nice way to support them at least. So I don't think anything wrong with that. The chess.com commentary beat records. They got over 40,000 people watching at one moment. Fantastic. And Danny Wrench and Robert Hess doing a great job there. Chess24 did some commentary as well with Grzchuk and Svidler. But chess.com are really the leaders with the most people watching, and that's where I'll be watching the game later on. Maybe I'll do some commentary live on it during the later rounds. We'll see how things go, but I'll leave you there. That's my commentary of round 1 of the World Championships. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you think it's too long or too short, because I'm going to try to do commentary on each game here that is played, and I'd love your feedback on how I can improve. Please do subscribe to the channel. Please like this video. Thank you very much. Goodbye for now.